American schools are being forced to display the Ten Commandments in the classroom. It's a complete takeover by Christian nationalists. Or is it? Join me in a deep examination of one sensationalist news headline as we separate fact from fiction and explore a satanic third side with questions nobody else seems to be asking.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. For the first half of the show, I want to talk about a news topic which isn't actually all that new or special, and my reason for choosing this one is to illustrate some points from a satanic perspective, more specifically some general ideas which I feel are typically all but completely overlooked in cases like this. Let me just first read you the headline that I read, dated March 9th, 2025. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signs a state law requiring the public display of the Ten Commandments in state public schools. And a quote from Governor Landry, "If you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses." Now, I'm sure there are people who will read the description of this episode and see that it's from a Satanism podcast and immediately think, oh, I know what's going to come next. This Satanist is going to rant and rave and cry about this victory for my Lord and Savior Jesus, because obviously he hates Jesus and views God as his enemy, which is why he worships Satan. Or the other extreme of the same sort of sentiment, there may be people who think, ooh, this Satanist is going to roast these stupid Christians and talk about how unconstitutional this all is, which is good because I'm always looking for something to listen to that bashes those dirty, rotten Republican Christian nationalists. Well, my focus in this episode is not really going to be on either. If you're a regular listener of Satansplain, you've probably noticed that one thing I don't really do is try to heavily dissect or pick apart Christianity. And that's not because I don't find it to be a pathetic religion. I certainly do. But the reality is that Satanism is not merely inverted Christianity. Satanism is its own religion with its own dogma, its own rituals, its own philosophy, and with that an endless number of things we can examine or talk about as Satanists, not just aspects of Satanism itself, but other things in life that we Satanists can experience or study through the context of Satanism. If you're particularly into things like Jesus mocking memes or websites that list contradictions found in the Bible, well, that's fine. I like a good religion-bashing joke myself as much as the next Satanist does. And I know that religion-bashing can also be a cathartic part of the religion deprogramming process for those who've been victims of religious indoctrination. But still, I'd like to think of Satansplain as a show that goes beyond that sort of Phase 1 Satanism, as we call it. So, what brought this news story to my attention in the first place? Well, if you follow the Church of Satan on any social media accounts, whether it's on X or Facebook or whatever, you'll occasionally run into people who will tag the Church of Satan channel in a post or show up in the replies to a post from the Church of Satan. Sometimes it's to call our attention to some journalist writing about us by name, and somebody has a legit question saying, hey, I want to know if this thing is true. Or, of course, there will be the Bible-quoting Jesus freak or conspiracy theorist who tags us and 10 other accounts on X for attention just to say something stupid. But then you also have the people who tag us to try to drag us into fights that aren't even ours in the first place, but they think we'll jump in on their side in an argument or do some stunt on their behalf, or the very least, fight with somebody and entertain them. Well, this gets us to the news topic I want to examine. Again, the headline, this came to me dated March 9th, and I'll talk a little bit more about the date later. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signs a state law requiring the public display of the Ten Commandments in state public schools. This headline shows up, and some people see it, and they tag the Church of Satan to say, okay, Church of Satan, go on and fight against this. We want to see you fight. Go fight the evil holy rollers. Or more passively, somebody will say, well, if they're going to allow this, then they have to allow all religions. So these Christians are going to be mad when the Church of Satan has to have a display too. And I'll take them here so that they see it. Here you are. I've tagged you, Church of Satan. Oh, you're going to be so happy that I did. Okay, and like the last 80 times we got tagged on something like this, the Church of Satan account responds with something like this. Yes, we've seen this. No, we aren't rushing to get involved. We don't condone the indoctrination of children, and we don't think religion should be pushed in schools. So we aren't going to do a thing that we don't think people should be doing. Like I said, this sort of news story is nothing new. In Satansplain episode 11, I talked about a case of school vouchers in Maine and a ruling that allowed people to use them for religious schools. And when that happened, there were people, on X and other places on social media who were not Satanists, do not live in Maine, and do not even have children, and yet telling us, oh, the Church of Satan needs to set up a satanic school because they could get that legally allowed now and compete with the Christians. And once again, we say, no, you're an idiot. We're not going to waste our time and money and resources to set up a school in the middle of nowhere when we're against childhood indoctrination, and seemingly the only reason to do this is to entertain you. You are some complete stranger from the internet. Piss off. Likewise, in Satansplain episode number 53, I read the essay Let's You and Him Fight, which describes this phenomenon. And of course, in the previous episode of Satansplain, episode number 85 on the Good Guy Badge, well, that's another episode where some of these topics overlap, including why trying to respond to Christian proselytizing with satanic proselytizing doesn't make any sense in the context of Satanism, doesn't accomplish anything, and in fact only makes the situations worse. Now, having said all of that, does this mean that when we non-Christian Americans see Christians trying to push theocracy, that the only correct response is for all of us to just roll over and ignore it? I would say no. It is, however, stupid to try to fight these sorts of things with, metaphorically, all guns blazing without stopping to examine first what's going on, or if your actions will really lead to the outcome you want. There are reasons why the 9 satanic sins include things like stupidity, counterproductive pride, and lack of perspective. So, hey, let's actually stop and think. Let's get into some questions which I haven't seen many people asking themselves regarding this 10 Commandments thing. First and foremost, when did this news story really come out? Yeah, the social media post was seen recently, but when did it happen? When did this bill pass? Is it even a real story? Well, it turns out the story is real, and it's actually from June of last year. So as Satanists, let's stop and think about that for a moment. This news, which people recently have either been outraged by or cheering on, happened last year, and in fact at the end of the school year. All right, so here's another question. Did they ever end up enforcing this law? When school finally started in September, did they do it? Well, I did a little more digging and found out that, not surprisingly, a lawsuit came out against it. Sometime in November of 2024, the ACLU argued it was unconstitutional. Gee, who didn't see that coming? And 5 of the school districts agreed, and a federal judge ruled in their favor. And it seems another group, Americans United for a Separation of Church and State, kind of similar to the ACLU in many ways, well, they also got involved, and from what I've read, it seems that still, as of today, as I record this episode in late March 2025, The law has not been enforced statewide because of ongoing legal challenges. There was a deadline of January 1st, 2025 for schools to comply, but apparently the federal court ruling halted it. But I guess the final outcome depends on the ruling from the Court of Appeals from the Fifth Circuit, which is still going. Well, this means that, in summary, the Christians who were recently declaring victory because of this, as well as the non-Christians who were outraged over it, are seemingly reacting to news that happened last year, and the intended effects of it never really got carried through. Speaking earlier of the 9 satanic sins, this brings to mind yet another one: forgetfulness of past orthodoxies. These attempts to have the 10 Commandments posted in public schools are nothing new. Or if not in a school, then having a monument of the 10 Commandments on some public grounds or similar. Now, there are way too many examples of these cases for me to list here and talk about. You can look them up on your own. But if you do look them up, you'll see that just about all of them were either rightfully struck down for being unconstitutional, or just didn't even become a law, and the bill died in committee, or in cases like this Louisiana one, it's still stuck in legal limbo. Now, when a placement of the 10 Commandments on public grounds fails for one or more of these reasons I just listed, does this mean Christian theocrats are going to pack it up and call it a day? No. Zealots don't give up that easily. They typically go for a different strategy. They figured that if you can't get the 10 Commandments displayed on religious grounds, then maybe you can get it displayed on some other secular grounds. One argument I've always heard from Christians is, "Oh, but don't you see, these 10 Commandments are good rules to have for everybody, not just Christians. I mean, read them. We see, like, don't murder and don't lie and don't steal. So how can you be against these? Are you saying you're pro-murder or you're pro-lying? You're pro-stealing?" So this argument, of course, conveniently overlooks that a number of the other commandments in the list aren't so secular. The first commandment, for example, says to have no gods before the God of the Bible, then goes on to say no graven images, which seems ironic if you're building a 10 Commandments monument. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, which, by the way, I think some denominations of Judaism would say is being violated when you write the name of God on something physical. Keep the Sabbath holy, even though schools are closed on Sunday anyway. Don't covet your neighbor's wife or cattle. Apparently, they think there's a big problem with school children envious of their classmates' spouses and cows. Yeah, we see that happening a lot in 7th grade, don't we? Well, I'm not going to spend much more time talking about how shoddy this list is. As I pointed out in Satansplain episode number 73, anybody can come up with a numbered ethics code that seems more reasonable to the average person than the 10 Commandments are. And we've seen plenty of different atheist groups or authors do that over the years. I talked in that episode about a book somebody published and so on. But aside from that whole argument for posting the 10 Commandments, another argument that Christians may use is that the 10 Commandments are a historical document. They argue that the founders of the U.S. viewed the 10 Commandments as a moral ethics code, and therefore it's part of Western civilization, and therefore you can include them in a public school classroom as an important historical document. Now, granted, I still think this is a bullshit argument. Yeah, you could say the founding fathers of the U.S. were European and thus from some kind of Judeo-Christian background, even if you had some who were deists or whatnot. But I'm not seeing a whole lot of overlap with the 10 Commandments and the Bill of Rights. But let's get to an even bigger question here. This bill about posting the 10 Commandments in Louisiana schools, which has since been signed into law, did anybody who's talking about it read it? Either read what the bill said or read what it said in its final form of the law? Because I gotta say, every time the media is screaming about some controversial new bill that is being passed through Congress or some other new controversial law, and people are sharing clickbait articles about it everywhere, whether for it or against it, I always have to ask these people, did any of you read the actual bill or law and what it actually says? And not surprisingly, the usual answer is no. Nobody from either side of the debate really even bothered to read it. They're both just emotionally reacting over headlines. Now, to be fair, we have all fallen for clickbait at some point or another. I would be lying if I said I never fell for a twisted news headline myself, or that I never jumped to conclusions about it that turned out to be wrong. But, again, whenever it's news about a government bill, I see a lot of passionate reaction with very little reading. Again, that goes for people on all sides of the political aisle. So I went ahead to read the original bill, and then I looked up and read the law that it was revised to, and that finally, the law that finally got onto the books. So if you search online for HB 71 Louisiana 10 Commandments, you can find the actual bill and read it for yourself. It's not very long. Likewise, if you want to see the law, you can go search online for Louisiana Act number 676. So the original bill I saw was just barely over 3 pages. Found a PDF of it easily enough. So here are some of the details. 1, the list is required to be in every public school classroom. 2, the minimum requirements are that they're displayed on a poster or framed document that's at least 11 by 14 inches. The commandments have to be the central focus of the poster, and they have to be printed in a large, easily readable font. And, they have to put in all those legal requirements because otherwise, somebody could just put up a copy of the 10 Commandments, print it on like a postage stamp, or write it big, but write it in secret code, some kind of hieroglyphs, and say, see, we complied with the law. Though it still seems possible you could have the 11 by 14 poster, have the 10 Commandments be the central focus of it, but then write at the top of the poster in the margins, hey, the following list is religious bullshit. I mean, I doubt any schools would do that, but again, it's just amusing to think of possibilities apparently within the bounds of the bill, or law now. I'll talk more about words in the margins in a moment. Taking up about a whole page of the bill is the text of the 10 Commandments themselves. And what I find interesting about this is that not every denomination of Christianity, or Judaism for that matter, has the 10 Commandments written in the same exact way. I don't know if you knew that, but the Catholics, the Protestants, the Orthodox churches, the Calvinists, and a few others, each of them breaks up the list differently. Now, granted, you could argue that it's more or less the same list. It's more or less the same Bible verses from the same part of the Bible. But when each of these denominations number the commandments, where they put the breaks, they don't all begin and end each commandment in the same place. There's also some slightly different wordings, maybe. Wikipedia actually has a nice table where you can see the differences listed out, and whose commandment number 5 is this and whose is number 6. But so I have to wonder if Christians of different denominations might say, well, wait a minute, we wanted the 10 Commandments posted, but not that version. That's, the heathenist Protestant version. We want our church's version. So here's another question. If you're requiring these posters to be created and posted in every classroom of every public school in the state, who has to print up the posters? Does it all come out of the school's budget and thus people's tax dollars? Well, this is where it gets a little more vague. The bill says, quote, an institution or management board may spend its funds or donated funds to purchase such displays and may accept donated displays. In the law, which is what the bill, again, became after it was passed, says schools are not required to spend their funds on displays, in which case they'll either have to accept displays donated by other people or accept money so that they can buy their own displays. And the law is a few pages longer than the original bill, and most of it is just citing prior cases where it was legally decided, okay, you can put the 10 Commandments on public property so long as somebody privately paid for it. So, you didn't use tax dollars. Then there are references to other court cases throughout the years that made the argument that there are secular reasons you can justify showing the 10 Commandments. Again, the claim that it's historically part of what shaped the morality of law in the United States, arguments like that. Then there are mentions of other documents like the Mayflower Compact, which is historical as far as American law goes, and it mentions deities, whatever. So once again, this all happened last year, and it sounds like it's not going through anyway. It's not being enforced. Now, as part of this rant, I have a few more questions about this that I don't think enough people are asking. So let's ask this. Why are Christians pushing for this in the first place? As I said, I know their argument, of course, is, well, it's part of American history and blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe some Christians sincerely believe that, and that's their motivation, but I suspect most Christians who want the commandments that badly in schools are really just wanting to have some sign of their religion in the schools and are using the history thing as a rationalization. Many sincerely tell themselves that this list is something which, if everybody were to follow it, well, the world would be a much better place. And this is, of course, what every religion says about themselves. It doesn't matter that most of the people who wanted this law can't even name all 10 commandments, but nevertheless, they overwhelmingly believe that schools have become these crazy and immoral places, and that by posting this list there, the schools, as opposed to a post office or drugstore or whatever, by posting these in the schools, somehow that may improve things for the school. Because, students always stop and read and heed things posted on the school walls. My school had a big poster of the periodic table. Maybe yours did too. Did any student end up becoming a chemist after graduation? I don't know, maybe one or two, but certainly not all of them. So anyway, what is this all about? It's really about the topic I think covered in the previous episode of Satansplain, the good guy badge. The governor feels all moral superior for showing everybody that he signed this law like a moral crusader. The people who supported it feel all superior for supporting it and sharing the clickbait articles about it. It doesn't matter, again, that the thing didn't ever get enforced or that people didn't even pay enough attention to the bill to read it or didn't even realize it was news from last year. They don't have to do anything. They can just clap. It's not some moral victory for Jesus. And so far as I can tell, it's not a theocracy on any effective level either. This is all just an act of mental masturbation. And no, the solution is not to try to get schools to post the 9 satanic statements next to the 10 commandments, because that would just be taking it from mental masturbation to circle jerk. And in closing, I will say this. If you, fellow Satanists, still understandably hate the fact that this religious nonsense has happened at all in the first place, and you want to challenge hardcore Christians on the news story on it, or similar stories like this, then I tell you what I don't suggest. Don't bother trying to argue with holy rollers from the angle of secularism or religious pluralism. These people will not listen to arguments like, well, if you're going to include your religion's commandments, then we should allow the commandments of all other religions too. So this is another one of the 9 satanic sins, the sin of solipsism. When you think that because it sounds reasonable in your own head, then it must sound reasonable in the heads of other people too. As I've said before, theocrats do not believe all religions should be treated equally. They don't believe in religious pluralism. If they did, they wouldn't be theocrats. Furthermore, their counterargument would be, no, those other lists from other religions are irrelevant. Lists like the Eightfold Path of Buddhism or Islam's 5 Pillars or Sharia law or the Hindu Vedas, well, they're not part of Western principles that the U.S. was founded on, and this is all about history, not religion, so those other things don't apply. That would be the kind of argument you'd hear from them. Or if they're more on the zealous side, they may say, no, the 10 Commandments are from God, and all those other lists are from other religions, and they're fake. They were probably made by Satan to deceive people, because everybody is going to hell except for Christians, and Christians of my denomination only. Okay, so what I suggest instead, again, if you really want to challenge Christians on laws like this one about pushing the 10 Commandments in schools, is instead of challenging them from a liberal angle, try challenging them from the more conservative angle. So the next time you see a conservative Christian saying the 10 Commandments should be posted in public schools, just ask them this. Why are your children in the public schools in the first place? Shouldn't you be homeschooling them? I mean, after all, if you think the public school system is so terrible of a place, with so much immorality going on that you think it warrants having to display the 10 laws from the cosmic creator of the universe in every classroom, then why are you sending your children there in the first place? Imagine there was another place in town, like a club or a rec center, and it had signs in every room saying, no blades longer than 5 inches, no crack pipes allowed, no adultery in the hallway, no murder, please. Is that a kind of place you'd be comfortable leaving your children at for a few hours? I'm guessing no. And yet, you're fine with sending your children to this other place for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, where they take orders from other adults whom I suspect you believe are teaching stuff you'd rather your kids not be indoctrinated to believe? But hey, if they have this sign on the walls of these 10 things, then you don't need to worry about it. You can just go about your day while the government-run institution takes care of your children. I'm sure that 11 by 14-inch sign will counter the effects of all that communist and sexual and trans agenda stuff you're so worried about. So yeah, see how they react to that. Well, that's enough of this rant from me. Let's take a break, and we'll get to some listener mail afterwards. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
The Naked Satanist, with your host, Reverend Jeff Ivins, where I strip down Satanism to its raw form. Find the podcast where you get your podcasts from, or by visiting nakedsatanist.com. Hail Satan.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the main website for the show at satansplain.com. There you can find every Satansplain episode. You can also listen to Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and a host of other places. If you are on social media, please give Satansplain a like and a follow, whatever the equivalent is, on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Likewise, if you're listening now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button for this episode. For all questions and correspondence, email me directly. The email address is bill@satansplain.com. And if you enjoy Satansplain and would like to support the show, please go to the show's page on Locals. Point your web browsers to satansplain.locals.com. You can sign up for Locals for free, but you can also additionally become a paid subscriber there. That is the best way you can support Satansplain. Although we also have a merch store. You can go to store.satansplain.com for that. And thank you, as always, to all of you who support the show in one way or another. A few weeks ago, I was invited as a guest on the Neutral Wisdom podcast. We had a good talk about music and musicianship and lesser magic and some other topics. That topic should be out sometime in early April. I'll be sharing the links when it's available. And you can learn more about the Neutral Wisdom podcast on its website, neutralwisdom.ca. That's neutralwisdom.ca. It's a Satanism podcast run by Church of Satan Warlock Robert Shirley. Next, though, I would like to share a satanic anecdote, and this one is from me. So, as this will be the episode's satanic anecdote, that means it's time for a Satanecdote. Cue the Satanecdote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanecdotes.
So as you can imagine, I do get my fair share of spam email. Some of it is, not surprisingly, the occasional Jesus freak who wants to send me hate mail, though I've gotten them from Muslims and even one Buddhist before. I'll also, of course, get requests from people in Nigeria to join the Illuminati. But as a podcast, I also get spam from people who say they can provide a service to make sure your podcast gets a higher ranking in Google or gets more likes on social media or something like that. I especially like it when one of those emails claims that my show is so low in visibility and, low in ranking, low in visibility and low in ranking, and that they can help, which of course makes me think, well, my podcast can't be that invisible since you were able to find me and send me spam. But anyway, I got this particular email from a self-proclaimed podcast virtual assistant. Okay. Like, does that mean he's virtual? He's a fake person? Or I guess he is a real person and he's assistant, but he's virtual. I don't know. Anyway, let me read you some of this. I'm really tempted to read this in an Indian accent, but I won't. Dear Bill, I hope you're doing well. My name is Ibrahim Hassan Rabi, and I assist with arranging podcast appearances for inspiring guests. I recently came across your podcast and was captivated by your content. It's truly impactful. I wanted to suggest Diana Esther as a guest on your show. She's amazing. Diana Esther is an author, poet, speaker, transformational coach, and inspirational teacher. She shares profound knowledge of enlightenment in a loving, simple, and intuitive way. Her miraculous recovery from lymphatic cancer and triumph over life challenges make her an expert in her field, helping clients transform their lives and achieve well-being through her personal experiences. Her journey across continents shaped her as a soul doctor and transformational coach, inspiring others to connect with her with their inner light and life purpose. Find life purpose and build health, peace, balance, and harmony. Like a diamond, she was molded under life's pressures, preserving to unlock wisdom and brilliance within herself and others. Diana can talk about a bunch of interesting topics, like preferred podcast categories, spiritual podcasts but not religious, universe, cosmic, heart-based, spiritual leadership, spirituality. All right, so on and on he goes. And finally attaching a link to Diana's press kit on her website. And he finishes this email about Diana by saying, "Thank you for considering Katrina for your podcast. I'm looking forward to the possibility of collaborating." So yeah, clearly from the wrong name at the end, never mind the content, this is some copy-paste job he's done with all sorts of podcasts who are paying him money, presumably, to spam other podcasts like mine for collaboration. And also, he clearly has no idea what Satansplain is about. I mean, he's looking for podcasts that are spiritual but not religious. I literally had an episode ranting about why Satanism is religious and not spiritual. I doubt Diana would want to appear on a Satanism podcast from, the description there. So at first I thought of writing him back and saying, well, I'm a Satanism podcast and this is some new age lady you're spamming me about. That's not going to work. Fuck off. Go away. Maybe I would throw in a snarky remark that my podcast isn't an interview show in the first place. And, he's obviously lying when he said he's listened to the show. So instead of doing that, I decided to play it dumb. So I looked up Diana's email address from her website and forwarded the mail that I got back to her, CCing this Ibrahim guy. And here's what I wrote to them. Hi, Diana. This publicist of yours, Ibrahim, emailed me to ask if I'd invite you as a guest on my Satanism podcast, Satansplain. I really don't know why, because my podcast doesn't fit any of the categories he listed. As a Satanist myself, I can't say I have much interest in things like inner light or building peace, balance, and harmony. Regardless, as you can see, Ibrahim says that he was, quote, captivated by my content and found it, quote, truly impactful. So perhaps he sees a great match here that I'm not seeing and can explain it further. Sincerely, Magister Bill M., Church of Satan. P.S. I see he also referred to you as Katrina at the end of the email for some reason. So that was my email back, and I also found out that this guy, Ibrahim, has an account on X. So after I sent that email, I posted a screenshot of it on X with Ibrahim tagged and Diane's name and the name of her book both hashtagged. And I never got a response back. Well, that is the end of my Satanecdote. Let's get to some listener mail. I've got an email from Joe. Joe says, greetings, Magister Bill. I've been watching a series on Apple TV called Surface. It's a mystery, and it takes place in San Francisco. The couple that are the protagonists live in a black house sandwiched between two lighter-colored houses. This house isn't quite as black as LeVay's house, but it was the first thing I thought of. So, could some Satanist have sneaked that in? I was wondering if anyone else out there who watched the show picked up on it. I also wanted to toss something else out there. I've heard you share some of your own experiences progressing from a form of Christianity and into the occult landscape and eventually finding the Satanic Bible. I myself began as a Methodist, and from there the typical Golden Dawn / Crowley stuff, and also Taoism and Buddhism. I don't regret learning about those things because it helped me figure out who I am not, but there was also a branch of magic I explored before Satanism, which I do still find intriguing, and that is chaos magic, mostly through Peter Carroll's works. I was wondering if it was something you ran into on your path, and if so, what did you experience? My opinion is that chaos magic isn't necessarily antithetical to Satanism, or at least some of the magical techniques. I think it is non-theistic, but entertains the supernatural. I don't hear many Satanists mention chaos magic, so I was wondering what your opinion was of it, if you have one. Well, I wrote back to Joe and I said regarding, first of all, that mention of a black house in San Francisco on that TV show, which I haven't seen. Yes, there could very well have been a Satanist in the writing department who put that subtle reference in there, but then again, the writers may have been researching ideas for occultism in America and stumbled across historical mentions of the Church of Satan and the original Black House headquarters in San Francisco, and just decided to take inspiration from there. That's another possibility. The way Joe described it seemed a bit more coincidental in comparison, I would say. As for chaos magic, well, whether you spell it with a C or a CK, I remember running into chaos magic, a chaos magic user on the witchcraft and occult scene some years ago. And he jokingly said that if you get 5 chaos magicians in a room, you'll get 6 different definitions of what chaos magic is and what it entails. And frankly, I concur with what he said. As for how chaos magic fits or doesn't fit in with Satanism, I can't think of much more to say that I didn't already cover in episode number 56 of Satansplain, and maybe also some of what I said in the episodes I did earlier this year on the book, The Satanic Rituals. So to try to give you a short version here, as a Satanist, you are certainly free to incorporate other props or aesthetics or readings from other cultural mythologies, or for that matter, other schools of occultism, and fit that into a satanic ritual context. The book, The Satanic Rituals, itself gives examples of mythologies taken from different parts of the world and puts it all into the context of satanic ceremonies. This does not mean, however, that satanic ritual is anything you possibly want it to be. Just because there are countless ways, valid ways, you can do a satanic ritual does not mean that there aren't any invalid ways. Now, I know stating things like this always upset the whining, solipsistic crybabies who see this as some sort of threat to their personal liberty. Oh, Bill, you can't tell me how to conduct my satanic rituals because Satanism is all about myself, and I am my own god, and you're being... Yeah. But, as I have said many times before, there are some objective parameters as to what Satanism is and what Satanism isn't. If there weren't, the word Satanism would be meaningless, as would calling yourself a Satanist. Can you sacrifice animals in a satanic ritual? No, because that's antithetical to Satanism, and the philosophical reasons why are fully explained in the Satanic Bible. Can you literally worship another deity in a satanic ritual? And I don't mean the purely theatrical mention of deities in a psychodramatic context, but literal belief even after the ritual is over. The answer is no. That, too, goes against Satanism, which is a non-theistic religion where the god is the self, not some supernatural deity. Can you incorporate some chaos magic symbols and incantations in a satanic ritual? Sure, if that's what you really want to do. If you find some emotional inspiration in those sorts of things, okay, fine. Go with it. From what I've read about chaos magic, though, there are some concepts that seem vague enough to be compatible with Satanism, and then there are others that just strike me personally as counterproductive. As Anton LaVey said in the Satanic Bible, if the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, then established occultists would do well as maze makers. As some others have said, LaVey took Occam's razor to the occult. He said, look, I've read all these occult books, and a lot of it is just a bunch of esoteric nonsense done for the sake of esotericism. A lot of ramblings that often aren't written well and don't seem to make any point, with some sanctimonious bullshit thrown into. So to quote Anton LaVey in the article I read in Satansplain, episode number 56, on occultism of the past, he says, quote, summing it up, if you need to steep yourselves in occult lore despite this diatribe, by all means do so, but do it as a ritual in itself that is objectively toward subjective ends. Read on knowing that you won't learn a damn thing in principle from Levi, Crowley, Regardi, or Sibyllique either that isn't extended 100-fold in the Satanic Bible or the Complete Witch. The Complete Witch is the book that was later renamed Satanic Witch. But that you'll have the spooky fun, ego food, and involvement which invariably accompanies a curriculum concerned more with the gathering of ingredients than the application of principles. All right, I'm just going to leave that there. I've got another email here, and this email is from Steven. He says that this may sound like a goofy question, but do you think Spock from Star Trek would have been a Satanist had that fictional world had Satanism in it? Now, I actually remember this question, the same question, coming up many, many years ago on a Satanism forum. And I totally understand it. Because we have this fictional character from the sci-fi franchise Star Trek, and I think it could be argued that this character has a number of satanic qualities, which we Satanists would call satanic. He has, for example, a clear intellectual superiority. He is a very logical and critical thinker who doesn't get irrational, emotional answers dictating reality to him. He even has mysterious powers with the neck pinch and the mind meld and all that. There's something I can satanically appreciate with that. So as a fictional character, would I say Spock is a Satanist? Personally, I would say no, I would not go that far. One of the reasons I say that is I do see some unsatanic qualities to him too, or at least some unsatanic downsides to the things he mentioned. Satanists are not people completely devoid of feelings. To go back to satanic ritual, that is a purely emotional act, not an intellectual one. It is designed that way. Even outside of the topic of ritual, I would say emotion has its place in Satanism, especially when it comes to indulgence. We don't really see the character of Spock smiling and enjoying any sort of materialistic pleasures, from what I recall. Also, the character of Spock is humorless, pretty much. And from what I've seen of him, he has no real feel, again, for indulgence. He certainly doesn't view himself as his own god or puts his own well-being over something as impersonal as the Federation, for example. So I still think it was a good question. And in summary, while I think the character has some admirable satanic qualities, I don't think I'd go so far as to call him a de facto Satanist. Then Stephen wrote back and was ranting about Captain Picard being the best captain, and I told Stephen, hey, I'm not a Trekkie. I'm a Whovian. That means I'm a Doctor Who nerd. So I have no horse in this race regarding who is the best captain on Star Trek. But I do think this is a fun thing to think about, to read a fictional book or watch a movie or TV show and find a character you really like. And as a Satanist, think, are there maybe some satanic qualities to this character? It's especially a good activity to do when you're watching any of the films from the Church of Satan suggested film list. You can find that on churchofsatan.com. There are different reasons why those movies are in the list, and in many cases, not all of them, but many, I would argue that there's a protagonist or maybe an anti-hero in the plot who exhibits some unusually satanic qualities. So those are some things to think about. And with that, let's end this episode of Satansplain. Maybe after you listen to this, you can go look up and watch one of those movies. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Hail Satan.
You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at Satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2025, Magister Bill M.